Welcome to a town that's all about glitz and glamour, the one where bright lights make the silver screen sparkle. But there's a not-so-glamorous side lurking in the shadows of fame. From the big shots to the rising stars, everyone's got a tale to tell about the not-so-fabulous consequences of alcohol. This isn't your typical gossip session. We're here to chat about real-life stuff. No gossip here, just real talk. I'm shining a light on the struggles behind the scenes, so get ready for a ride through the highs and lows of Hollywood, where addiction has played a role in the stories of these 10 stars. Judy Garland. So you know Judy Garland, right? The amazing actress who stole our hearts as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, who could forget those ruby slippers and that magical journey down the yellow brick road? Anyway, I've got some juicy details about her life that you might find intriguing. I remember watching The Wizard of Oz and being completely enchanted by her performance, but as I dug deeper into Judy's story, I found that her real-life journey wasn't all rainbows and munchkins. She had this well-documented struggle with substances, including alcohol. In the late 1960s, Judy Garland's health had deteriorated, partly due to her battles with addiction. On June 22, 1969, she was found unconscious in her London home and was subsequently admitted to the Danesborough Hospital in London. This incident was attributed to an overdose of barbiturates, which was a result of her struggles with prescription medications and alcohol. Judy Garland faced a series of personal and professional challenges throughout her career, and her struggles with substance abuse had a significant impact on her life. She passed away on June 22, 1969, at the age of 47, just a few weeks after the hospitalization. The official cause of death was ruled as an accidental overdose of barbiturates. You know, it's fascinating how someone can bring so much joy to the world through their art and then still face their battles. And with Judy, it wasn't just about the stage. It was about the complexities of being a real, flawed person behind the curtain. Marilyn Monroe. I've always thought she was this enigmatic icon, you know? I mean, who hasn't seen that icon image of her with the billowing white dress? It's a classic. Now, Marilyn was a megastar during the 1950s and early 60s, raking in a whopping $200 million from her films. But here's the kicker. She was facing some tough times. Mental health battles, substance abuse. It was a real roller coaster for her. She had a history of alcohol abuse and addiction. She reportedly began drinking at a young age, and her use of alcohol escalated throughout her life. By the early 1960s, she was struggling with alcoholism, and it was a significant factor in her death in 1962. Monroe's alcohol abuse was often related to her mental health problems, which included depression, anxiety, and insomnia. She used alcohol to self-medicate, and it provided her with temporary relief from her emotional pain. However, her alcohol use also exacerbated her problems, and it made it difficult for her to cope with daily life. In January 1961, following her divorce from writer Arthur Miller, she chose to enter the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic, PWC, for treatment. However, she was unable to maintain her sobriety, and her alcohol use continued to interfere with her personal and professional life. On August 4th, 1962, Monroe was found dead in her home, and her death was ruled a probable suicide. Toxicology reports found that she had a high level of barbiturates in her system, and there was also evidence of alcohol consumption. Monroe's struggles with alcohol abuse are a reminder of the complex relationship between mental health and substance use disorders. Alcohol can provide temporary relief from emotional pain, but it is also a powerful substance that can have serious consequences for both physical and mental health. Billie Holiday. The legendary jazz singer, Billie Holiday, was a force of nature. I first stumbled upon her soulful voice in this old record store, and it was like discovering a hidden treasure. Billie, the lady with blue eyes, faces life head on. She wasn't just singing about heartache, she was living it. Her journey was like a melody with both highs and lows, and I couldn't help but be drawn into the rhythm of her life. She was addicted to alcohol throughout much of her life. She began drinking as a teenager, and her use of alcohol escalated over the years. By the 1940s, she was a heavy drinker, and her addiction was taking a toll on her health and career. Holliday's substance abuse was often a way for her to cope with the challenges of her life, including racism, sexism, and financial instability. She also used alcohol to numb her pain and escape from her difficult reality. Holliday's alcohol abuse had a significant impact on her career. It led to missed performances, strained relationships with bandmates and managers, and a decline in her vocal ability. By the 1950s, she was no longer able to perform regularly, and she was struggling to make ends meet. In 1959, Holliday died of cirrhosis of the liver, which was caused by her long-term alcohol abuse. Her death was a tragic end to a life that was filled with both immense talent and personal struggles. Despite her struggles with addiction, Billie Holiday is still considered one of the greatest jazz singers of all time. Her unique voice and expressive style profoundly impacted jazz music, and she continues to inspire musicians today. But wait, I've got more to share. Later on, I'll get deeper into the resilience of such artists and the way they faced alcohol dependence. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge is like this hidden gem in Hollywood, and her story is something else. Dorothy faced some tough times, and sadly, it took her toll on her. Dorothy struggled with substance abuse, including alcohol and antidepressants. She faced numerous personal and professional challenges throughout her life, and these struggles likely contributed to her substance abuse. Dandridge's childhood was marked by poverty and instability. She grew up in segregated Memphis, Tennessee, and experienced discrimination and racism from a young age. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she moved around frequently with her mother and stepfather. In the 1950s, Dandridge became the first African-American woman to win an Academy Award for her role in the film Cameron Jones. However, her success did not bring her financial stability. She was reportedly mismanaged by her second husband, who squandered her money. Dandridge also experienced personal tragedies. She gave birth to a daughter who was institutionalized because she had been born with brain damage. The separation from her daughter was a source of great pain for Dandridge. To cope with her personal and professional challenges, Dandridge turned to alcohol and antidepressants. Her substance use escalated in the 1960s, and it began to have a negative impact on her career. She missed performances and was often plagued by financial troubles. In 1965, Dandridge was found dead in her apartment from an overdose of barbiturates and alcohol. Her death was ruled a suicide, but there was still some debate about whether it was intentional or accidental. It's heartbreaking to think that someone who reached such highs in Hollywood could be battling depression and addiction behind the scenes. But you know, what this tells me is mental health struggles don't discriminate, and I don't think that anyone, regardless of their race or gender, can be dealing with these issues alone. Edith Piaf. Hey, have you ever heard of Edith Piaf? Smoky Persian cabarets, dim lights, and this incredible voice that cuts through the air? Edith had a long struggle with alcoholism and drug addiction. She started drinking at a young age to cope with the hardship of her childhood and the demanding nature of her career. Her addiction worsened over time, and it became a major factor in her declining health and eventual death. Piaf's first taste of alcohol came at the age of 15, when she was living with her mother, a cabaret singer who struggled with alcoholism herself. Piaf found that alcohol helped her to feel more confident and less self-conscious. She began to drink more regularly. At just 17 years old, she became a mom, but tragically lost her daughter to meningitis at age 2. As Piaf's career took off, she found herself under increasing pressure to perform and to maintain her image as a glamorous and sophisticated star. She also developed a number of physical ailments, including rheumatoid arthritis and hepatitis, which made her feel pain and discomfort. To cope with these stressors, Piaf turned to alcohol and drugs. She started using barbiturates to help her sleep and to ease her physical pain. She also began to drink more heavily. Her addiction gradually took over her life, and she missed performances, failed to fulfill commitments, and became increasingly difficult to work with. In 1951, Piaf was involved in a serious car accident that left her with severe injuries. She was given morphine to ease the pain, and this further exacerbated her addiction to drugs. She became dependent on morphine, and she was unable to function without it. Piaf's addiction continued to worsen throughout the 1950s and early 1960s. She was hospitalized several times for her addiction, and she attempted to quit on numerous occasions, but was unsuccessful. Her addiction took a toll on her health, and she developed cirrhosis of the liver and other health problems. In 1963, Piaf was scheduled to perform at the Olympia Theater in Paris. However, she was too ill to perform, and she was rushed to the hospital, where she died of a cardiac arrest on September 10, 1963. She was just 47 years old. Piaf's struggles with addiction were a tragic part of her life, but they also contributed to her unique and powerful artistry. Her music was deeply personal and emotionally resonant, and it often reflected her own struggles and heartbreak. Her legacy as a singer and as a cultural icon is enduring, and her music continues to touch people all over the world. Tula Bankhead. This actress was basically the epitome of wit and charm. You know those people who just light up a room? That was Tula. Tula wasn't your run-of-the-mill actress with a simple drinking problem. Oh no, she was a legendary drinker. Like, she could down a whole bottle of bourbon in under 30 minutes. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. In that same 30 minutes, she'd conquer 100 cigarettes, inhale a cloud of cocaine, and all while charming the socks off anyone in her line of sight. And her preferred attire for this wild party? Stark naked. Yep, you heard me right. Now imagine her holding court at New York's Algonquin Round Table, or rubbing elbows with Hollywood's drinking elite. Tula wasn't just there for a good time, she was the life of the debauchery party. She once said, "The only thing I regret about my past is the length of it. If I had to live my life again, I'd make the same mistakes, only sooner." Fast forward to 1968. She's 66, and after uttering her final words, codeine bourbon, she passed away in New York, succumbing to pneumonia. How did she catch pneumonia? Oh, you know, just strolling around her dressing room in a Philadelphia theater, completely in the buff. Janis Joplin. It's the psychedelic 60s, a time of revolution and soul-stirring music. In walks Janis, the rock queen with a voice that could shatter glass. 1970, the year the music world lost a gem. Janis, this powerhouse of talent, was found in her hotel room after a heroin overdose. It was like the universal hitting of pause on the song that's still echoing in our hearts. She once said, "On stage, I make love to 25,000 different people, then I go home alone." Can you feel the loneliness in those words? It's like she poured her soul out on stage, but when the cheers faded, she faced silence. Janis Joplin struggled with alcoholism throughout much of her life. She began drinking as a teenager, and her use of alcohol escalated over the years. By the 1960s, she was a heavy drinker, and her addiction was taking its toll on her health. Joplin's alcohol abuse had a significant impact also on her career. It led to missed performances, strained relationship with bandmates and managers, and a decline in her vocal ability. Methamphetamine injections, Southern Comfort as her constant companion, she battled the shadows. Sobriety attempts peppered her journey, but the rock and roll lifestyle made it a maze. And here's the thing, as she belted out those soulful tunes, she was surrounded by fellow rock and roll stars, dancing with the same demons. It's like she was caught in this whirlwind, trying to find solid ground. You know, her music wasn't just notes and lyrics, it was a raw, unfiltered expression of her journey. Margaret Truman. Now, let's shift gears to Margaret Truman, daughter of President Harry S. Truman. Can you imagine growing up in the political limelight, surrounded by the expectations of an entire nation? I stumbled upon Margaret's story while I was getting into political histories, and let me tell you, it's a tale of navigating personal identity in the shadow of political prominence. Truman's drinking problems began after she graduated from college and began working as a reporter. She found that alcohol helped her cope with the stress of the job and the pressures of being the daughter of a famous president. As her drinking escalated, Truman's personal life became increasingly troubled. She had several failed marriages, and she struggled to maintain relationships with her family and friends. Her alcoholism also affected her career, as she was often late for work and missed deadlines. In the 1970s, Truman decided to seek help for her alcoholism. She entered a treatment program and eventually managed to stay sober for several years. However, she relapsed in the 1980s and continued to struggle with her addiction for the rest of her life. Truman's alcoholism was a source of great shame and embarrassment for her. She was a private person who did not want to talk about her problems, and she often lied about her drinking. However, she eventually gained the courage to speak out about her experience and became an advocate for alcoholism treatment. Zelda Fitzgerald. Zelda Fitzgerald is like this captivating character from a bygone era, and her story is both enchanting and heartbreaking. First things first, you might recognize the name because she was the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, the literary genius behind The Great Gatsby. Now, Zelda wasn't just a tag-along in her husband's story, she had her spotlight, and it was pretty darn bright. Zelda had a complex and long-standing relationship with alcohol. She began drinking in her early 20s, and her use of alcohol escalated over the years. By the 1930s, she was drinking heavily, and her addiction was taking a toll on her health, mental health, and relationship with her husband. Now, some smarty pants out there think Zelda might have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. Others say it could have been the result of guzzling down dodgy alcohol during the Prohibition era. You know, the real deal moonshine. Add in some experimental psychological and medical treatments, and it's a recipe for a wild ride. Zelda's biographer, Teresa Ann Fowler, spilled the beans, saying Zelda did suffer some mental health crisis, depression primarily, and was an uninhibited, uncensored woman who didn't always think before she acted. But she wasn't crazy. Unwise? Sometimes. Insane? No. Can you feel the drama? It's like Zelda was living in a whirlwind of societal changes, bootleg booze, and a little bit of madness. But hey, she wasn't just a victim of circumstance, she was a bold, uncensored soul who danced to her jazz soundtrack. Eva Peron. Eva Peron, the former First Lady of Argentina. Her story is like a tango, passionate and full of twists and turns. Pull up a chair, my friend, and let me tell you all about it. According to some sources, she developed the addiction when she was young, possibly a way to deal with her difficult childhood and the poverty she experienced. As her public life became more demanding, there were reports that her drinking intensified. She was often seen drinking at parties and social events, and she was known to indulge in heavy drinking at times. There were also claims that she had a heavy drinking problem in the 1940s, which her husband reportedly helped her overcome. However, other sources suggest that her drinking habits never really ceased, and that they worsened as she got older, particularly after suffering from a miscarriage in 1951. There are accounts that she would sometimes drink to excess in order to cope with her grief and the pressure of her position as the First Lady of Argentina. Her alcoholism was often a source of concern for those close to her, including her husband and her personal doctor. Her doctor, Pedro Aura, who was also a close friend, reportedly tried to help her curb her drinking by prescribing her medications. However, these attempts were apparently unsuccessful, as her drinking continued to affect her health and her public image. In 1952, Eva Peron died at the age of 33 from uterine cancer. It is possible that her long-term alcohol use may have contributed to her health problems. And that's a wrap. If you're inspired by this story, why not check out our other video on 5 vintage beauties who drugged themselves to death next. Remember, every star has a story waiting to be told. Until next time, keep those reels rolling.